All right, today we're tackling a really interesting question. What is actually going on with Nepal's economy right now? We're going to connect the dots between some of the biggest stories in business, farming, and government policy to build a snapshot of the challenges and, believe it or not, the opportunities facing the country. Let's get into it. So, what could a massive stock market scandal, a humble bunch of bananas, and the entire national budget possibly have in common? I know, it sounds like the beginning of a really weird joke, right? But stick with me, because these things are way more connected than you'd think. By the end of this, you'll see exactly how. Okay, let's kick things off in the high-stakes world of finance. There's a huge investigation going on that's really shaking up the stock market and making people ask some tough questions about who you can trust. So, before we dive into the details, we need to be clear on what we're talking about. What exactly is a fraudulent transaction under Nepalese law? Well, it's not just a slip-up. We're talking about really deliberate stuff, like buying shares with borrowed money you haven't paid back yet, and this is the big one, artificially jacking up prices to fool other investors. So, what's the story here? Well, Nepal's main financial watchdog, SEBON, is alleging that 4 people teamed up with a brokerage firm, Bhrikuti Stock Broking Company, to run what looks like a massive, illegal shared trading scheme. And get a load of the numbers we're talking about. This is wild. Just one businessman involved, Deepak Bhatta, allegedly owes the brokerage more than 2.7 billion rupees. I mean, that is a staggering amount of money, and it just shows you how huge this whole thing is. And this quote, which is straight from the official report, really gets to the heart of it. SEBON is basically saying, look, this wasn't just some accident. They believe this was a calculated move to pump up stock prices and straight up deceive everyone else in the market. Okay, so you've got these billions of rupees flying around on paper in the stock market, but what does that mean for the average person? You know, what's happening out in the fields, on the streets? Let's switch gears and take a look at the ground level economy. All right, we're leaving the trading floor behind and heading out to the farms. And out here, you find a totally different kind of economic pressure. This is all about producers just trying to get a fair shake for their work. And this right here tells you everything you need to know. A farmer gets maybe 70 to 85 rupees for a dozen bananas. But by the time we go to buy them, the price has jumped to 350, even 400 rupees. That's a massive gap. So where's all that money going? Well, if you ask the farmers, they'll tell you straight up. It's the middlemen. The head of the Banana Producers Federation is basically accusing them of rigging the market, driving up the price of local bananas on purpose, all so they can make it easier to import cheaper bananas from India. But you know, it's not all doom and gloom. Farmers are tough and they're adapting. We're seeing some really smart moves, like farmers switching to crops that actually make them more money. Take corn, for example. It's bringing in a much better yield than wheat, which is a clever way to fight back in a tough market. Okay, let's move on to another huge piece of Nepal's economy, and that's tourism. And boy, is it going through a massive shift right now. The old way of doing things is changing, and that's opening up some brand new opportunities. This chart says it all, really. You can see that bookings from the usual places, Europe and the US, have taken a pretty big hit. But then, look at that other bar. Tourists from India and even domestic travelers from within Nepal are surging, more than making up for the difference. So why the big change? Well, a lot of it has to do with global tensions, which have caused a ton of cancellations. We're talking 30 to 40% from Western tourists. Now, that could have been a disaster, but this huge wave of visitors from the region is basically saving the day for the tourism industry. And there's another really promising sign for the future. An airline, Sri Airlines, just got the green light for regular international flights. That's a huge deal. They're only the second private airline to get this permission. This could be a game changer for connecting with nearby countries and pouring even more fuel on that regional tourism fire. Okay, so let's recap. We've got a shaky financial market, farmers getting squeezed, and a tourism sector that's completely transforming. So that brings us to the big question. What is the government doing about all this? What tools are they using to try and steer the ship? One major thing they're doing is clamping down on real estate. There's a new rule. If you're doing a property deal worth over 30 million rupees, it has to go through a licensed company now. It's a clear move to make these high-value deals more transparent and formal. But while the government is trying to bring in new rules, it's also dealing with a massive money problem of its own. Just look at these numbers. The government has to spend 1.33 trillion rupees on things it absolutely can't get out of. The problem? It's only expecting to collect 1.18 trillion. That's a big, big gap to fill. So, what do you do? How do you get the economy moving again when you're short on cash? Well, they've come up with a pretty creative idea. Pay government employees twice a month instead of just once. The thinking is that this gets cash flowing into the market faster, about 8.65 billion rupees every 2 weeks, to hopefully get people spending again. So, we've looked at the stock market, the banana farms, tourism, and government policies. When you put it all together, what does it tell us? Well, it's pretty clear that Nepal's economy is at a real crossroads, with all these powerful forces pulling it in different directions. And this really pulls it all together. You can see these key conflicts playing out everywhere. It's the battle for an honest market versus fraud. It's farmers versus middlemen. It's the old tourism model versus the new one. And it's the government trying to spend what it needs to versus the money it actually has. And all of this leaves us with one final massive question. With all these competing pressures pushing and pulling on the economy, which path forward is going to build a stronger and, maybe more importantly, a fairer economy for everyone in Nepal? That's the real issue at the heart of it all.